Hello F11 members and welcome to the Fundamentals of Post-Production video tutorials for issue 55, August 2016. Come with me if you would to Tuscany, a beautiful morning overlooking the Val d'Orcia. And I was doing one-to-one tuition with F11 member Brian Birkenhead when we had this fabulous session with gorgeous light and really quite a wonderful situation. So what we have in front of us now is on the left the finished image that I'm going to talk you through the processing of, and on the right we have the starting point, the raw image straight out of the camera. And I've done quite a bit to this picture to get it to where it needed to be, to liven it up, to optimize the picture there. So using both Lightroom and Photoshop, so I'd like to talk you through that whole decision-making process. So here we go. I'm in Lightroom and I'm just going to basically now look at this image here and go back to where I started. So I'll just select this one picture here, the starting point there, go to the Develop module, and that's the image straight out. Sorry, I've selected the wrong file. Let's go to that. That is the image straight out of the camera that I'm now going to work on. Now the first thing I'm going to do is come right down in the Develop module to right down the bottom. One thing to be aware of when you're working in Lightroom is that the order you do things is really of no importance. You can do it in whatever order you want. So just because something's up here at the top of the Develop module means that you have to do it first. What I'm going to do first is look at the profile corrections for the lens I've used here. And just looking at the shot here, I'm aware of the fact that the corners of the image are darker than the center. Happens with all lenses, and actually if I now just click on Enable Profile Corrections, what it's done is it's recognized the lens I'm using and has corrected for that lens to give me a much more even coverage over the whole image area. I don't do that with every picture, but in this particular case I think it's a good thing to do. The next thing I'm going to do is sharpen the picture. Okay, just before I start, I'm working on the more creative things that we're going to do to the image. So I click on the Lightroom default sharpen setting here, and then I just come down and fine tune that using the masking slider here. I hold down my Alt key on the keyboard, move masking to the right and apply the masking so that it just affects the sky. The black is the mask, and that means sharpening is only taking account of the image, the area in the image that has discernible detail. Okay, now the next thing I do is come up here and look at the image overall, and my histogram is as good a histogram as I could ask for, really. I used a filter on this shot, two filters in fact. I used a 0.9 ND Grad Soft to hold back the top of the frame and a polarizer. Nevertheless, we can see here that we have an image that the top half of the frame is hazy and washed out. Nevertheless, the detail is there, as is indicated by the histogram, so I'm confident that with a bit of skillful and subtle adjustments in Lightroom and in Photoshop, we'll be able to really bring that detail out. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do then is just looking at the shadows in the picture. I can tell I'm not clipping any highlights, but I just want to boost shadows a touch there. To how much? Good question. I'm looking at the lower part of the frame really here, and I'm just going to give round about plus 25 on the shadows there. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is come down and use the dehaze, Lightroom's dehazer, which is right down the bottom here. in the Effects tab, okay, and I'm now going to add a little bit and add a fair touch of dehazing to, and you can see the effect it has. In fact, I go all the way. It's totally gruesome, well over the top. But this is a tool that is a new addition to Lightroom. Came in just over a year ago, and it's really useful, but very easy to overdo. So I'm going to go to about plus 35 there, and that takes out some of the haze. If I take out all of the haze, I think it looks unnatural. So it's taken out some of the haze in the picture. Okay, and now the next thing I do is looking at the image overall. I'm well aware that the bottom half of the frame here is a little bit dark. I want this image to be quite bright and airy, really, not too dark and moody. So I'm going to use the grad tool here, and holding down the shift key on my keyboard to make sure that the grad is level, I bring a grad in from the bottom of the image. Okay, now I'm just going to move that grad up so it's affecting the bottom half of the image, really, with a fairly soft transition there. And what I'm going to do with the grad is just lighten the lower portion of the image. So I come here to exposure there, and I'm going to put about plus 45 in on that, plus 50 maybe, around about there. And I'm quite happy with that. So I just click on done now. Okay, so the image is starting to come to me. Next thing I'm going to do is just come up here and I'm going to add a touch of vibrance. Again, not too much. Vibrance used in tandem with the dehazer can be can result in a picture that's way too overcooked. So I need to be subtle there. So I'm just putting plus 10 in on vibrance. Next thing I'm going to look at the image is the sky. It's got some detail there, but I think we can bring out a bit more. So I'm going to use the grad tool again, use the shift key, and then pull a grad down so it's affecting that area of the sky, starting there just above the villa and just going into the sky there. And with this I'm going to pull back the exposure to about minus 30. And I'm going to add a touch of contrast. No, I'm not. First thing, before I do that, I'm just going to look at the highlights. I want to pull those back. I want to retrieve as many of these highlights in the top left-hand corner of the image as possible. So I'm going to go quite heavy on the highlight recovery to about minus 80. And I'm also going to add a touch of contrast to the sky. Here, using the grad tool, about plus 50. Click on done, and what I'm looking at now is an image that, if I compare it with where I started, is pretty good. I'm well pleased with it. But I'm not finished yet. Just go back to where I am. What I want to do here is I just want to add a bit more contrast just to this area of the frame here in the sort of top left area of the image. I don't want to take out all that haze, but I want to give that area just a touch more contrast. And of course I want to take out, if we zoom into the image here, you will see there's an annoying cable too. So what I'm going to do actually is now open up this image in Photoshop and continue working on it there. So just give me 1 second. So here is the image in Photoshop, and the first thing I'm going to do before I start doing anything to it is actually make a duplicate layer. So if I go up here to the top tab, click on layer, click on duplicate layer, it now asks me what I want to do, and I'm going to make a background copy Okay, so if I just bring my layers palette in on the screen here, you'll see now we have two layers identical to each other. Why have I done this? Well, I've done it really because when you're making adjustments to an image, it's always best to work with a layer because then it's non-destructive editing. Anything I do is not affecting the image itself until it's flattened. I can always go back or discard the layer and start again. It's just good working practice to get into. I'm now going to actually select then on this top layer, the background copy, the area of the image that I want to make adjustments to. So if I just bring in my tools palette here, and I'm going to use the lasso tool, which I find such a useful tool. And all I'm going to do is very roughly select the kind of area that I want to adjust the contrast in. I just want to add a bit of density and contrast to this area. And I make a very rough selection using my lasso tool there. What I'm going to do now is feather that selection. So if I go select, modify and feather, I'm going to feather it across a radius of a whacking great 500 pixels, which means this is going to have a very soft edge, this selection, which means any adjustments I make should blend smoothly into the surrounding image area. Now I go Image, Adjustments and Curves, and if I bring in my Curves tablet now, coming over here, there we go. What I want to do is, first of all, I'm going to just adjust the black point just of this area that I've selected. But hang on, I've missed a step, so just bear with me. It always pays to just stop and think about what you're doing. So what I'm going to do actually to this selected area is make a mask, right? Okay, so if I now go up to Layer, Mask, and Reveal Selection, what I've done is, if you see on the left, right here now, we've got the top layer with a mask applied. And that means that I can now make selections, make adjustments to the area that I've selected. But I can then subsequently fine-tune the edges of that mask if it's not quite right. So now what I'm going to do is, getting ahead of myself there, go Image, Adjustments, Curves. Again, there's my Curves tablet. Now what I'm going to do is actually adjust the density of that area of the image. Click on Preview. Cancel that because I'm making all the mistakes, but I'm sure you do the same. And I deliberately keep these mistakes in these video tutorials because we learn more from our mistakes than we do from our successes. And what I was trying to do there was make adjustments of contrast and density, but I had the mask selected and not the actual layer itself. So now if I select the layer, and now if I go Image, Adjustments, Curves, now as you see, if I start to adjust the curve of this image there, the area of the image that I've selected that we can see because of the mask, I can now adjust the density and the contrast of it. So what I'm going to do is first of all, make it darker and also add a touch of contrast to that area of the image there. If I click this preview button on and off, you can see the effect that's having. Again, I need to be subtle. I don't want to be too heavy-handed here. Whatever adjustments I make have to be believable. But I think that's enhancing the landscape and the distance significantly. So I click on OK there. And now if I wanted to modify the area of that that selection was working on. I could do by modifying the mask, but I think the feathering is doing a good job really, and that looks natural. I can't see any join, so I'm quite happy now to go layer and flatten the image. Down here, flatten image. Last thing I need to do to this picture, just take that away for the moment, is now deal with this cable in there. So I'm going to zoom in to quite high magnification, move over to the area I want, and using the content aware healing brush, which is this one here, I'm now just going to adjust my size of the brush using my square brackets on the keyboard, and I'm just going to take out that cable there. This is a job that actually Wendy is far better at than I am. Nevertheless, it's a relatively simple job with this very versatile tool. So just take that out. I can always come back and use the cloning brush if it hasn't done it quite how I want it. There are. We've denied the Villa Casanova of telephone reception, or TV, or whatever it was. Okay, now zoom out. And that's it. That's the picture done. So combined use of Lightroom and Photoshop to take this one raw image and bring out the best in it. And I must admit I'm quite pleased with this picture. Okay, in part 2 I'm going to work on an image from a shoot in a barley field in Dorset. I'll see you there in part 2. Thank you.